In a quiet American town, a humble mechanic spends sleepless nights in his small workshop, not fixing cars, but building hope. When he meets a little girl whose wheelchair is broken, his act of kindness sets off a chain of miracles that will change 3 lives forever. Now let's get started. The clang of metal filled the quiet Ohio night as Ethan worked alone in his dimly lit garage. Sparks flew from the welding torch, reflecting off his tired eyes and oil-stained hands. The air smelled of grease and steel, but he didn't mind. It was peaceful in a strange way. The hum of tools, the soft whir of the fan, and the steady rhythm of his heart pushing him forward. Every night after closing the garage, when others went home, Ethan stayed. He wasn't fixing a car this time. He was building something far more important. It had started 2 weeks ago. He had just finished changing a truck tire outside the community center when he heard crying. It was a small sound at first, almost drowned by the noise of the busy street. But when he turned, he saw a little girl sitting on the pavement beside a broken wheelchair. Her mother knelt beside her, trying to calm her down, but tears kept falling. The sight stopped Ethan in his tracks. He didn't know them, but something about that image, a child trapped by something she couldn't fix, tore through his chest. The mother's name was Claire. She looked exhausted, with her brown hair tied up loosely, dark circles under her eyes, and clothes that had seen better days. When Ethan approached, she quickly wiped her daughter's tears, trying to smile. "Sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "Her wheelchair just gave up. I don't know how to fix it." Ethan knelt beside them, inspected the chair, and knew right away it wasn't repairable. "I can take a look in my shop," he offered gently. Claire hesitated, embarrassed. "I can't pay much. We're barely making rent." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't ask for money." That night, the image wouldn't leave his mind. The girl's sad eyes, the way she clutched a small stuffed bunny as if it was her last bit of comfort. Her name was Lily, and she was only 7. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He'd grown up poor himself, raised by a single mother after his dad left. He knew what it meant to go without help, to feel stuck. So he made a decision that night. He would build her a wheelchair, not just any wheelchair, but one that could make her feel free again. The next morning, after finishing his regular repairs, Ethan began collecting scraps from the back of his workshop. He found metal rods, spare bike parts, an old electric motor from a lawnmower, and whatever else he thought might work. His co-workers teased him. "Building a spaceship, Cole?" one joked. Ethan grinned. "Something like that." He didn't explain further. Some things were better left unspoken until they were real. He set up a corner in the back of the shop, marked it with tape, and began sketching designs on a piece of cardboard. His handwriting was messy, but his ideas were clear. Every night he worked until the early hours. He cut, shaped, and welded, sweat dripping down his face as the cold wind from the open door brushed against his neck. Sometimes he'd stop to take a sip of coffee gone cold hours ago. He didn't have fancy tools or expensive materials, just skill, patience, and heart. He measured every bolt twice, every angle carefully, knowing that this wasn't a machine for speed or style. This was someone's future. This was freedom for a child who couldn't walk. The thought alone kept him going when fatigue threatened to break him. One night around midnight, Claire stopped by. She stood at the workshop door, hesitant. "You're still up?" she asked softly. Ethan looked up from the welding table, wiping his forehead. "Couldn't sleep," he said with a tired smile. She held out a small box. Cookies. Lily wanted you to have them," he chuckled, setting down his tools. "Tell her I'll eat them when the wheels are ready." Claire's eyes softened. "You really don't have to do this." "We can figure something out." Ethan's gaze dropped to the half-built frame before him. "Maybe I need to do this as much as she needs it," he replied quietly. As the nights passed, the wheelchair began to take shape, strong, simple, and carefully crafted. Ethan added adjustable handles, padded cushions, and lightweight wheels for smoother movement. He even painted it a soft sky blue color, remembering Lily's favorite shade when she showed him her drawings one afternoon. The paint dried under the golden glow of a small lamp, the workshop silent, except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Ethan leaned against the table, exhausted but proud. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. The next step was the motor assist. Ethan had never built one before, but he spent his lunch breaks watching old tutorials on his phone, scribbling notes on napkins. He wired the controls, tested the battery, and prayed it wouldn't blow up. The first test failed. Smoke filled the air, and a small spark burned his glove. He laughed, despite himself. "Guess we're not there yet," he muttered. But he didn't stop. He fixed, tested, and failed again, until finally one night the motor purred softly under the seat. The chair moved forward, smooth and steady. Ethan's smile lit up the dark room. Days turned into weeks, and the project became a part of him. The townspeople began noticing the late-night lights from his workshop. Some said he was building something secret. Others thought he'd gone mad. But when Claire visited again with Lily, they saw what he'd been creating, and both were speechless. Lily's eyes widened as she saw the chair. She ran her small hand along the smooth frame, her fingers trembling. "Is it for me?" she whispered. Ethan nodded, trying not to show the emotion in his voice. "It's yours. Want to try it?" He lifted her gently into the seat and adjusted the footrests. When she pressed the small joystick on the armrest, the chair moved. Slow at first, then steady. Lily's laughter filled the air, echoing through the workshop. Claire covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her daughter spin in circles, free for the first time in months. Ethan turned away for a moment, pretending to wipe sweat, but his eyes burned too. For him, that sound, that laughter, was worth every sleepless night. Later, as the sun rose through the workshop window, Ethan stood silently, looking at the now empty chair stand. The floor was littered with bolts, tools, and coffee cups, but it was beautiful, a mess born from love and effort. He leaned on the table, hands trembling slightly, and whispered to himself, "Maybe this is what I was meant to fix all along." The day had begun, but for Ethan, something deeper had just awakened, the start of a change he didn't yet see coming. The next few days felt like a quiet storm in Ethan's heart. Word spread around the small Ohio town about what he'd done for Lily, though he hadn't told anyone himself. People who once passed by his workshop without a glance now peeked through the open door, curious. Claire stopped by often, bringing coffee or sandwiches as thanks, but Ethan always waved it off with a grin. "You're making me lazy," he joked. Truthfully, her visits had become the best part of his day. She had a soft laugh, tired eyes that held both struggle and grace, and a way of speaking that made him feel seen. Lily came too, always full of energy, showing off her new independence. She zoomed around the workshop like it was a playground, her laughter echoing through the walls. "Slow down, speed racer," Ethan would shout, pretending to chase her with a wrench. She'd giggle, spin in circles, and stop only to ask 100 questions about tools, wires, and how the chair worked. It warmed him to see her so alive, and each time she smiled, he remembered why those long nights had been worth it. Claire often stood by the door, watching them with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something she didn't have words for. One afternoon she lingered while Lily played outside. "You changed everything for her," she said softly. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and shrugged. "She changed things for me, too." Claire tilted her head. "How so?" He looked out the window, thinking. "I used to fix cars. Now I fix things that matter." The words came out rough, unplanned, but true. She smiled, that soft, tired smile that made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. But good news travels fast, and soon Ethan's quiet act of kindness reached beyond their small town. A local reporter showed up one morning, notebook in hand, eager to write about the mechanic who built a miracle. Ethan tried to refuse. He didn't do it for attention, but Claire convinced him. "Maybe someone else will see and want to help," she said. So reluctantly he agreed. The article went online 2 days later, with a photo of Ethan standing beside the wheelchair, grease on his hands, pride in his eyes. The headline read, "Local mechanic builds, hope for a little girl." The response was overwhelming. People started sending letters, emails, even small donations. Some shared stories of their own children who needed help. Others offered parts, tools, and support. Ethan had never been a man of many words, but he wrote back to each one, promising to try. That night, as he read through messages on his old laptop, Claire and Lily visited again. Lily climbed onto a stool beside him and pointed at the screen. "Are they all talking about you?" she asked, amazed. Ethan chuckled. "Guess so. But it's really about you, kiddo." Soon, his workshop became more than a repair shop. Boxes of donated materials arrived. Volunteers offered to help. A local high school teacher even brought her students to learn welding basics while contributing to building frames. Ethan named the small group Wheels of Hope, a name Claire came up with. "Sounds right," she'd said, tracing the logo on a piece of cardboard. "Because that's what you give people, hope." He had smiled, though part of him didn't believe it yet. Hope felt like something far bigger than he deserved to create. Still, he kept working, night after night, building more wheelchairs for other kids whose families couldn't afford them. Every chair had a small blue heart painted somewhere hidden, a quiet signature of love and purpose. As the work grew, so did his bond with Claire and Lily. They became a constant in his life. Lily called him Mr. E, and Claire often brought warm soup on cold nights, insisting he take a break. Sometimes they'd sit outside the shop, under the soft glow of the streetlight, talking about nothing and everything, music, small-town dreams, memories that still hurt but made them who they were. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the tin roof, Claire lingered after Lily had fallen asleep in the car. The air smelled of metal and rainwater. "You've done so much," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "You don't even know how much this means." Ethan looked up from his workbench. "It's just a chair, Claire." She shook her head. "No, it's not. You gave her a way to live again. You gave me hope." He paused, caught in her gaze. There was something raw, almost fragile between them, a silence that said everything words couldn't. Then she smiled, breaking the tension. "You're a good man, Ethan." He looked down. "Just trying to do right." Weeks passed, and Wheels of Hope began to attract attention from nearby cities. A local news station filmed a small segment, showing kids testing their new wheelchairs, smiling, laughing. Ethan became a quiet hero in town, though he never got used to the attention. When people stopped him on the street to thank him, he'd blush, mumble something, and walk away. But deep inside, he felt something new growing. A sense of belonging, of purpose. He wasn't just fixing things anymore. He was building lives. One afternoon, as Ethan worked on a new design, Lily came running in, clutching a handmade drawing. "Look," she said proudly. It showed Ethan's workshop, with a big heart in the middle and stick figures of the three of them, him, Claire, and her, smiling under the sun. "That's you," she pointed, "because you make people happy." Ethan stared at the drawing for a long time, his throat tightening. He hung it on the wall, right above his workbench, where he could see it every day. That night, as the workshop lights dimmed, Ethan sat alone, staring at the wheelchair frames lined up against the wall. His hands were sore, his back ached, but he felt at peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't just existing, he was living. He had found a purpose in helping others, and in the process had built something more than machines. He had built a family. Outside, the sound of rain softened into silence. He looked at the old photograph of his late mother pinned to the wall, whispering, "You were right. The best things we build aren't made of metal." He smiled faintly, turned off the lights, and stepped out into the cool night. Somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed, Lily's laughter, and for Ethan, that was enough to know he was exactly where he needed to be. The months rolled by, and Ethan's life changed in quiet, beautiful ways he hadn't expected. His workshop, once filled with old car parts and rusted tools, now shone with life, bright blue paint, laughter, and the gentle whirring of motors. Children visited every week to receive wheelchairs that carried pieces of his heart in every screw and weld. Local businesses donated supplies, neighbors brought food, and volunteers came to help. The small Ohio town had turned his dream into a movement. Wheels of Hope wasn't just a name anymore. It was a promise, one Ethan worked every day to keep. Claire had become his closest friend, his confidant, and something more he was too afraid to name. She was always there, sorting boxes, organizing lists, helping kids learn to use their new chairs. Sometimes she'd glance at him with that soft, proud smile that made the air between them heavy. He'd look away, hiding behind work, unsure if she felt the same. They were two broken people building something whole together, and maybe that was enough. Lily, meanwhile, had become a symbol of everything the project stood for: strength, freedom, and joy. Her laughter filled the workshop like sunlight. One morning, Ethan found a letter waiting on his desk. The paper had a government seal. He frowned, opened it, and read the words twice to believe them. The State Foundation for Children with Disabilities wanted to fund Wheels of Hope. They wanted him to build on a larger scale, to supply hospitals and schools across the region. His hands trembled as he held the letter. He wasn't a businessman. He was just a mechanic. But now the dream was growing beyond him. When he showed Claire, she gasped, covering her mouth. "Ethan, this is huge. Do you understand what this means?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, it means we've got a lot more work to do." The following months were a blur of meetings, designs, and paperwork, things Ethan never imagined himself doing. Claire helped him with the formal side, while he focused on what he loved most: building. The workshop expanded. A new sign was painted above the door, bright and bold: Wheels of Hope, changing lives. One wheel at a time. When it was unveiled, the whole town gathered to celebrate. There was food, laughter, music, and a small ceremony. Ethan, standing in front of everyone, felt something he'd never felt before: pride without guilt, joy without fear. During the ceremony, Lily rolled up beside him, holding a microphone almost too big for her hands. "I just want to say thank you," she said, her voice small but brave. "Because of Mr. Ethan, I can go to school, play with my friends, and even race." The crowd laughed warmly. "He's my hero." Ethan froze, emotion catching in his throat. He knelt beside her, speaking softly into the mic. "Heroes just fix what's broken, sweetheart. Sometimes it's metal, sometimes it's people." The applause that followed wasn't for fame. It was for kindness, the quiet kind that changes the world, one small act at a time. Later that night, after the crowd had gone and the lights dimmed, Claire and Ethan stood outside the workshop. The cool wind brushed past them, carrying the smell of fresh paint and rain. "You did it," she said quietly. "No," he replied, looking at her. "We did it." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you." He hesitated for a moment, then reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Funny, I was just thinking the same about you." The silence that followed was warm and fragile. For the first time, neither looked away. Life settled into a new rhythm. Ethan's foundation built more than 20 custom chairs that year, each one delivered personally by him and his small team. He met families who'd lost hope and watched their faces light up again. Every story reminded him why he started, not for glory, not for money, but because people deserved a chance to move forward. And yet, amid all the good, he sometimes caught himself thinking about his own journey. He'd spent so many years fixing engines, trapped in routine, never realizing he could build something that truly mattered. Now he couldn't imagine doing anything else. One winter evening, snow drifted outside as Ethan worked late. The workshop was quiet, except for the soft crackle of a heater in the corner. On the wall hung Lily's old drawing, the one with the 3 stick figures and a heart in the middle. He smiled at it, then heard small footsteps behind him. It was Claire, bundled in her coat, holding 2 cups of cocoa. "You never stop, do you?" she teased. "Machines don't build themselves," he said, grinning. She handed him a cup. "You deserve a break." They sat in silence for a while, watching the snow through the foggy window. After a long pause, Claire spoke softly. "You know, when I met you, I was lost. Everything felt heavy. Bills, doctors, life. But you gave me something I didn't even know I needed." Ethan looked at her, his eyes soft. "What's that?" "Faith," she whispered. "That good people still exist." He said nothing for a moment, just looked at her, the warmth in her voice wrapping around his heart like a quiet fire. Then he smiled, barely above a whisper. "Guess we both needed fixing." She laughed softly, and he couldn't help but join her. Months later, Wheels of Hope hosted its first regional event in Columbus. Dozens of families attended, and local media covered it live. Ethan stood on stage again, this time under bright lights, humbled and nervous. Claire and Lily sat in the front row, beaming with pride. "When I started this," he began, "I thought I was building one chair. I didn't know I was building a future, not just for others, but for myself." His voice cracked as he looked at Lily. "That little girl taught me what real strength looks like." The audience rose in applause, and for a brief moment, Ethan let himself believe he deserved it. When it was over, Lily ran up to him, jumping into his arms as much as her small frame allowed. "You did it, Mr. E," she shouted. He laughed, spinning her gently. "No, kiddo, we did it." Claire joined them, placing a hand on his shoulder, her eyes bright with tears. "You changed our lives, Ethan." He met her gaze, his voice low but steady. "You changed mine first," and in that simple truth, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by his kindness, Ethan finally understood the full circle of what he'd done that night. Back in his workshop, he sat under the soft glow of the single bulb, looking at the empty space where Lily's first chair had once stood. It had been months since she'd outgrown it, yet he could still hear her laughter, still feel the moment she'd first moved on her own. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. The sound of the old clock ticked softly, steady and sure, just like the beat of a heart that had found its rhythm. In the end, he realized something simple but profound. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can ripple farther than any dream. One chair, one girl, one man trying to make a difference. And from those 3 lives intertwined by chance, something beautiful was born: hope, love, and the proof that when you give selflessly, you don't just rebuild someone's world. You rebuild your own.